If there's anything on earth that's become the epitome of the adage, the rich get richer, it is the NBA. There have been a number of teams over the course of NBA history that began with a ton of talent and continue to stack the deck one by one. I think of Bill Russell's Celtics and the X number of Hall of Famers they had. How the Lakers went from the contenders to Showtime to then drafting Kobe and signing Shaq in free agency. I've seen the Miami Heat go from Dwayne Wade and Shaq to Wade, Chris Bosh, LeBron, and Ray Allen. And then there are the modern day Golden State Warriors that changed the balance in the NBA unlike any team or NBA dynasty I think the league has ever seen. I still think to myself, how do the Warriors go from this to this with a whole lot of this in between? To make a very long story short, it was luck, flawless team management, the perfect blend of egos and personalities, a little bit of luck, excellent drafting, Kevin Durant fully embracing the can't beat 'em, join 'em proposition, a great coaching staff, and finally, Wardell Stephen Curry. Yeah, I'm always going to give Steph Curry a good portion of the credit for the Warriors dynasty, and you should too. It's been a known fact for a better part of a decade now that Steph Curry is hands down the greatest shooter in the history of basketball. And that's one statement that no one can argue, which is nice considering the fact that every subject in basketball is turned into a television debate nowadays. Anyway, the all-time leader in games with at least 10 or more three-pointers made in NBA history. The man who broke his own record for most threes in a season multiple times, converting on 45% from threes during his unanimous MVP season when he attempted nearly 900 threes, and the record holder for the most three-pointers made in the history of the sport. Look, do I need to continue? Because I don't think so.
Guarding him from the start, Wiggins again. Here's Curry for the record. It's good! And there it is! Stephen Curry, the all-time three-point king in the NBA!
I realized that Klay Thompson missed almost 3 years of basketball, which led to a whole lot of NBA fans forgetting who and what Klay really was, and I think can still be. But he's ultimately the other half of the Splash Brothers, and the tandem of Steph and Klay is, ultimately, the reason the Warriors are what they've become today. No amount of explaining would justify just how revolutionary the Splash Brothers have been for this franchise and the level of damage they've inflicted on the league since they united in 2011. And I think it goes without saying just how incredibly fortunate the Warriors were to draft the best and arguably the second best shooter of all time in a span of just 3 years, more than a decade later. Okay, so here we have Steph Curry as the all-time leader in three-pointers made. Klay Thompson comes in at 18th all-time with his 1,912, but I think we can all come to the consensus that Klay would have already been in the top 5 by now if he didn't miss almost 3 years. Considering that Klay Thompson hit at least 220 from his first All-Star season in 2014 to his last full season before the injuries in the 2018 season, if we just do the simple math over the theoretical 2.5 seasons that Klay missed, instead of 1,912 career threes, Klay would have been at least at 2,600 career threes. And if we look back at the leaderboard for the best shooters of all time by three-point makes, Klay's theoretical 2,600 three-pointers would have placed him 3rd all time. Now think about that. Now, of course, I'm just making a conservative estimate of what his number would have been. Who knows? It could have been second behind Steph or even neck and neck. We could play the what if game all we want, but this was just to give you an idea of just how differently a lot of people would have viewed Klay Thompson in a historical light. I already think that he's the second greatest shooter to ever play in the NBA, and I think if injuries didn't rob 3 years of his prime, it would have been a foregone conclusion. In the 2015-16 season, the Warriors broke the record for the most wins in a season, featured the player that hit far and away the most three-pointers ever in a season with 402, and finished the season with 1,077 total threes made. Steph's 402 and Klay's 276 threes combined to account for nearly 63% of the team's 3 points. 2 guys did that. And then in the 2018 season, Steph and Klay hit nearly 600 of the team's 1,087 total three-pointers. Both the 2015 and 2018 Warriors finished in the top 20 for all-time three-pointers made in a single season by an NBA team. And even though, I would say, around 90% of NBA fans would consider the 2015-16 and 2018-19 Warriors to be considerably better than the 2021 and 22 Warriors, take a closer look at this. The 2021 Warriors finished 7th all-time in team three-pointers made with 1,176. And remember, that's with Klay Thompson missing around half the season because he didn't make his return until early in January. So, if Klay wasn't there for 40-ish games, who else was nailing threes at a ridiculous clip to make last year's Warriors among the greatest shooting teams of all time? Well, I quickly wanted to point out that Klay made 114 3-pointers last season, which means that he was well on pace to hitting his regular 230 plus threes. And so for Steph Curry, his notorious down year saw him hit only 285 3-pointers. He took 750 attempts, which is about where he's at consistently, but only shot 38% from the three last year. And that's what really got me thinking. If Klay wasn't even around for half the season, and if Steph hit considerably fewer threes than any of his last several seasons, how in the world were the Warriors third in the NBA last season in 3-point makes? I've got to be missing something here. And when I took a closer look at the Warriors' next level stats from last season, I figured it out. The NBA really just let a 3rd-star level sniper get drafted to the Warriors. Not their fault, I know. But how did 29 other NBA teams not see this man coming? And how did he fall all the way at the bottom of the first round with that kind of talent? If you haven't figured out who I'm talking about, yep, it's Jordan Poole. Poole nailed 211 3-point shots last season, and now it makes sense. Steph, Klay, and Poole accounted for more than 600 of the team's 3-pointers, just those 3 guys alone. And just for a quick comparison, the team we all thought was the best shooting team ever with a healthy Klay, Steph, and Kevin Durant, the 2018-19 Warriors, with that big 3, hit a total of 732 3-pointers. Keeping in mind that Klay played a full season and Steph shot his routine 44% from 3 as opposed to an off 2021 season, which again saw him shoot only 38%. So now I'll ask you, if Steph, Klay, and Poole finished 3rd in the NBA and 7th all-time in 3-point makes with half of Klay Thompson, and Steph in his rare shooting slump, and a man who wasn't even a full-time starter for points last season in Jordan Poole, what does that tell you? If you ask me, it's that this trio on the Warriors is simply the greatest and most explosive 3-point shooting duo in recent NBA history and could very well rise to all-time great heights. Now, imagine if Klay played in 75 games. Imagine if Steph hit his standard clip of 350-ish threes. What would that number have been? Now this is a mouthful, but listen. Would the 2021 Warriors have surpassed the 2018-19 Houston Rockets, led by Chris Paul and James Harden, with more than 1,323 total threes, to place the Warriors first all-time in makes in NBA history? I can say almost for a fact that they would have been at least really, really close. And the wilder part of all of this is that we still have yet to really see these 3 click for a long stretch, whether it was because Klay wasn't around, Steph's Curry injury that forced him to miss like the end of the regular season, or whatever the case may be. But when we did see them, we saw them hang as much as 70 points in less than 20 minutes of action in the playoffs against the Denver Nuggets. And we did see them dismantle the Dallas Mavericks, who took down the number 1 seeded Phoenix Suns and completely wiped them out in a Game 7. But all of us at least know there was much more where that came from.